So my name is Kelly Dixon. As Bart mentioned, I'm from the Regional Transportation Council, and I want to thank you again for being here this morning. We're really delighted by the response to the Citizen Planning School. And while transportation is my focus, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I'm really a generalist at heart. So I want to spend just the next few minutes talking to you about some important data points for our region, including transportation, but also about housing, food access, climate change, a lot of the areas you all have expressed interest in your applications. And the Regional Sustainability Team for One Region Forward has spent a great deal of time over the past year and a half, 2 years, assembling the data I'm going to talk about, analyzing it, to really help us understand what's been happening in our region over the past few decades. So as the saying goes, you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And so for a while, we know that the way our region has developed over time has been having some negative impacts. But we felt it was really important to have some key data points to get to specific and really tell the story of what's been happening. So it's important for us to begin with and know that over the past 4 decades, our developmental footprint has grown by about 78% here in the 2-county area, but also at that same time, we've lost 16% of our population. So we built a lot more stuff, roads, infrastructure, sewer, things to take care of and pay for, but we have fewer people around to help us pay for that as a whole. And at the same time in that time frame, we've seen about a slight increase in the number of households. So 55,000 more households today than we did in 1970. And you may be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, we lost population, how do we have more households? And this just relates to the national trend that we see in our society of a decreasing family size. So we've got many more single-headed households than we did in years past. Extended family members like grandma and grandpa who may have lived with us in decades before aren't necessarily doing that in the same numbers today. So one large household of the past now has essentially been replaced by some smaller multiple households, so that helps to explain that number here. But it gets more interesting. So also in this time frame, we built 150,000 new homes in our region, so far outpaced the number of new households that have been formed. And at the same time, as we've built these new homes, we've also abandoned a number of homes in the city. And over the past 4 years, our vacancy rate actually in the 2-county area has tripled. So this isn't a city issue any longer for Buffalo, Niagara. We see vacancy bleeding into Cheektowaga, the Tonawandas. It's an issue for the village of Sloan and rural places like Springville. So this is a regional issue. I know some of you have firsthand experience of this, but it's something that we've got to focus on and solve together. And in terms of the types of homes we've been building, so if we just look from 2001 to 2011, in that 10-year period, 75% of the building permits were for single-family homes only. And that's interesting because if we also look at our demographics, only 28% of the households here in the region were households with children. So we've got large single-family homes for smaller household sizes, and in terms of the size of those homes, that's also increased significantly over the past few decades. So back in 1970, the average square footage of a home was about 1,750 square feet. Now that's, in today's terms, jumped up to about 2,300. So larger home, smaller household size, more space to heat, so that also impacts the pocketbook. So jumping over to transportation, we've got some new homes. How are people going to get to those homes, and how are they going to get to the places that they work from those new structures? So since 1990, we've added 525 new lane miles of roads in the 2-county area. And so when you think about that, you build the road, but it doesn't stop there, right? So you've got maintenance for the road, so you've got to pave it every few years. You're going to have to fill potholes, a few more this year after the winter that we've had. You've got to patrol the road, and also plow it. So if you take those types of factors all together, it really adds up to about a $26 million annual tax burden for our two-county area, so not an insignificant number for us to maintain the roads that we have in our region. So more roads, things are spread out. We drive further and further each day, and about 10 more miles a day per person here in the two-county region now than we did back in 1970. In terms of people getting to work, we have more people driving alone today than we did in years past. We also had more folks taking public transportation back in 1970 to work than we do here today. And again, as we've spread out, it makes it increasingly harder for the transit system to really accommodate and connect workers to jobs and residents to destinations that are more spread out in our region. So if we look at what a family in the Buffalo-Niagara region now spends on transportation costs per month, it's about $1,100. That's not insignificant. It is encouraging that we do see more people that are biking to work and using that form of transportation. But again, we've got a lot of roads that we've built over the past few decades, and many of those roads don't necessarily safely accommodate bicyclists. So looking forward, it's really important for us to think about ways that we can repave those roads to make it a safer form of transportation for bicyclists and other modes of transportation. Food access is a very key point of research for One Region Forward. It's also an interesting opportunity for the region. We've got today, in terms of the acreage of farmlands utilized for fruits and vegetables, slightly lower, significantly lower actually than it was back in 1969. So if we're going by what the USDA says we should be eating every day, we're only getting to about 38% of the fruits and vegetables that we need to intake to meet those guidelines. Overall, if we look at farmland in the Buffalo-Niagara region, less acreage on which to grow produce, fruits and vegetables, and other types of food. And in terms of farms, a key industry, we've lost about 33 farms every year over the past 4 decades. So if you total that all up, it's about 1,250 farms that we've lost in our region over time. And you may think, well, is that really important? Because I go to the supermarket and, you know, there's every fruit and vegetable I could possibly imagine there right before me. In terms of where that food comes from, it travels many miles to get here to Western New York. So as transportation costs rise over time, and you think about those places where that food's grown, California, which is, you know, just an example that's experienced severe drought, all of those factors will really increase the price of the food that ends up here in our supermarkets and grocery stores here in Western New York. So we have the ability to grow more food here locally, and that's really something that is important for us to think about, especially in terms of our pocketbooks going forward here in the region. So farming has declined in our region. What else has happened in terms of our overall economy? Our factory-based economy has shrunk, manufacturing, but we've gained activity in many other sectors. And so what I want to point out here to you is that our economy now looks a lot like the rest of the nation. We've lost those manufacturing jobs. We can't lose them again. And what's exciting and what gets us excited to think about here with One Region Forward is that we're starting to see a slight bump in our population here in Western New York. And in terms of looking out to 2050, the United States is going to have a projection of about 150 million more people by the year 2050. And where are all these people going to go? We think we're going to capture some, and we're hopeful for a variety of things. Positive things are already happening here in the region, but you do look like at places in California. I have a sister in Texas, and those areas in the South and Southwest that grew significantly in the past few decades aren't really sure where their water sources are necessarily coming from in the next 5 to 7 years. So you factor that in, and some extreme storms that have been happening on the coast. We do have storms here in western New York of the snow variety, but we handle those pretty well. So all of those factors taking into consideration looks and makes Buffalo Niagara a more attractive place going forward, and we think we're going to get some more folks here too with us. So more folks coming, but for those that are here, we are an older region now, and it's important to point out that nearly a third of our region's population is at least 55 years of age or older. And if we think about this, many of the older adults that are here in the region, maybe in working age, a significant number moved out to those newer homes when they were constructed with their families. And at the time, folks were healthy, had 20/20 vision or close to it, and so driving to work, driving to the grocery store, driving to church or your place of worship, to the doctor, it didn't really seem like a big deal. But fast forward to now, and you take that ability to drive or the ability to afford and operate a car out of the equation, and it really does become a big deal in terms of reaching basic services in our region for that subsector of the population. So that's another important aspect and challenge for us to face. We're older, but we're also more diverse, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, but if we just look in the past decade, our population was stagnant for the most part. So we lost some people, but we gained some people too. And in terms of the people that came to the region, our composition has become more diverse, which is reflected by the changes that you see here up here in the slide, and those that came here recently in blue. And despite our differences in race, ethnicity, we all do rely on our need and use for electricity. So united by our need for energy, and currently it's important to note that about 60% of our electricity use comes from fossil fuel, and nearly all of our energy for transportation comes from fossil fuels. So going forward, it's really important that we develop alternative ways to heat and light our homes as well as fuel our cars to decrease our overall rising carbon footprint. But we're lucky because we have all of you here today that have enrolled in the Citizen Planning School to help us meet that challenge. And I think this older white gentleman that you may have heard of said it best. I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. And the great point is to bring them the real facts and beer, but in this case it was coffee. So again, thank you so much for coming. We've got some resources here that you may find helpful online. If you've not visited oneregionforward.org, there is a wealth of information on some of the various topics that you all have expressed interest in. Census.gov is also a great resource, and we're going to have more information coming ahead soon. So we look forward to seeing you at the next session on May 3rd. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dean Shibley. Thank you.